paddling a boat while catching fish, surviving only by drinking water from banana trees, and savoring rich, creamy taro. Those were just some of the things Ed did in this challenge. His opponent? Matt Roy, a true survival expert who once took part in a 21-day survival series. And his swimming skills? Definitely no joke. With a total straight-line distance of about 65 kilometers, whoever reaches the lighthouse first will be the winner. The challenge hasn't even started yet, and Ed already asks the referee, asterisk, if there's an accident, is there a rescue helicopter? Asterisk. But the referee's answer left Ed completely speechless. What do you think the referee said? Drop your guesses in the comments below. We're dying to hear them. The very first task after the challenge began was to reach land. Both of them swam like mad toward the island ahead. It didn't take long before Matt set foot on the island and immediately started searching for shelter. Though night was already falling, Ed was still drifting on the sea. It wasn't until late at night that he finally reached the shore, his limbs weak and exhausted. He lay down on the rocks and fell asleep. Things seemed to be getting better when Ed woke up early in the morning. However, his surfboard had mysteriously disappeared without any reason. This frightened him even more than going without food for 9 meals over 3 days. In a panic, he rushed around the island to search for it. Matt had a great night's sleep. When he woke up, he also found fresh water, something even more precious than finding gold. Ed's efforts were finally rewarded. He found his surfboard just as the tide began to rise, filling him with joy. But now, he had another mission, finding food. He stumbled upon a giant taro root and, without a second thought, cut off a piece and ate it raw. The result? His tongue went numb the moment he bit into it. Guys, don't try this at home. Definitely don't follow Ed's example. Just a few meters ahead, he found a few banana trees. It's known that banana trunks contain a good amount of clean water, perfect for rehydration. He carved a large hole into the trunk and began to enjoy his first sweet sips of fresh water on the island. Meanwhile, Matt was taking a swim in the sea when he noticed quite a few plastic bags and other plastic waste floating near the island. Curious, he swam back to shore to investigate. There, he found a surprising amount of plastic debris, but it looked like he might be able to salvage a few useful items from it. Even so, Matt reminded himself, and wants to remind everyone, that we must protect the environment. Please don't litter and always dispose of waste responsibly. On this side of the island, Ed was starting a fire to prepare some roasted taro, a fairly easy task for someone like him. After getting the fire going, he built a simple shelter using bamboo and tree leaves right next to the fire. While waiting for the taro to cook, Ed made the most of his time by crafting a wooden paddle, hoping it would help him navigate the sea more easily the next day. Finally, he got to enjoy his delicious, rich, and creamy roasted taro, a well-earned treat after a long, hard day. On the other side of the island, Matt was working on his dream of building a large boat. He tied floats to both sides of a bamboo log and secured them tightly. After a full day of hard work, he finally took a rest to prepare for tomorrow's journey. By the third day, Matt looked at his bicycle and came up with a bold idea. He secured the bike onto the raft, hoping he could pedal across the sea. Next, he crafted a few propeller-like fins and attached them to the tires. These would act like paddles. The final step was testing it out. Matt pedaled with excitement and realized everything was working just fine. Well, except for one thing. The chain snapped. Ed's approach was much simpler. All he needed were 4 bamboo poles and his trusty surfboard. Just like that, his raft was complete. Matt hadn't eaten in 3 days. It was time to get some calories. He made a spear gun out of bamboo and a rubber band to catch some fish. Just then, he spotted an eel swimming in the water. He took aim and fired a precise shot, taking down the eel. He enjoyed part of it raw as fresh sashimi and saved the rest to make smoked eel for longer preservation. On the morning of the 4th day, Matt set off in a hurry, bringing with him some smoked eel meat and a wooden paddle as his essential supplies. As for Ed, he was standing on a high point, observing the wind direction. Based on his judgment, the wind was blowing toward the final destination. To get ahead of Matt, he decided to harness the power of the wind. He crafted a sail using palm leaves and his jacket, then made a bow and arrows from bamboo branches and shoelaces. Standing on the beach, he fired several arrows into the water one after another, but not a single creature surfaced. He was so frustrated, he couldn't even speak. Matt seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself on his raft, paddling along while snacking, living his best life. This was about as perfect as it gets. But perhaps a 21-day survival challenge with someone of the opposite sex would be even more interesting. The final day of the challenge had arrived. With the help of the eastern wind, Ed's raft was flying across the water like an arrow. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Why not catch a fish right now? He grabbed his bow and took a shot. Luckily, he managed to catch a large sea fish weighing several kilos. He ate it raw to enjoy its freshness, and at that moment, his body was bursting with energy. Matt, exhausted from paddling for too long, had completely run out of energy. In contrast, Ed Stafford was still full of strength, powering forward with ease. He surged ahead and crossed the finish line first, claiming victory. His next opponent is someone truly special. His name is Hakeem. He's a survival expert and an American ninja with 22 years of martial arts experience. When the two first met, Hakeem told Ed that he had watched his survival shows and was a big fan of his skills. That's why he was eager to challenge Ed in a head-to-head survival showdown. The challenge takes place in the Zoj Marsh, located on the eastern edge of the Tibetan Plateau. This area is also known as the highest altitude marshland in the world. From here, both will trek 70 kilometers west through wetland terrain, then swim across a massive lake. Whoever reaches the opposite shore first will be declared the winner. At the referee's signal, the challenge begins. For Ed, walking through water wasn't his strength, so heading uphill was the smartest choice. After trekking for a while, the rain began to fall. Taking advantage of the downpour, he collected some extra water. At the same time, he even found a wildflower and happily munched on it like a tasty little snack. Hakeem, on the other hand, went straight into the marshland, and that turned out to be his biggest mistake. The terrain was far more difficult to move through than he had expected. Stuck and struggling, he decided to rely on his ninja skills. He started waving his hands, moving his legs in a strange rhythm, and chanting some mysterious incantation, and then Ed appeared, now making his way through the high mountain region. Thick fog surrounded him, making it nearly impossible to see. He could only move forward one slow, careful step at a time along the steep cliffside. One wrong move here, and it could end in a tragic accident. Not far from there, Hakeem also reached the southern mountainous forest, where natural resources were abundant and could be put to good use. He entered a cave and found some dry grass, quickly stuffed it into a bamboo tube he had picked up earlier, then sealed one end to make it easier to carry and keep it from getting wet. He discovered some fresh wolf droppings nearby. With the instincts of a ninja, he knew he had to leave this dangerous place as quickly as possible to avoid a potential encounter with a pack of aggressive wolves. Ed seemed to have better luck. He found a cave right up the hill. Taking the opportunity, he cut down some bushes to make a makeshift bed. Completely exhausted after a full day of travel, he went to sleep early. Meanwhile, Hakeem didn't want to rely entirely on the power of ninjutsu. He decided to use his own strength to start a fire, but unfortunately, that night he had to sleep without one. The next morning, he woke up with his body freezing cold, so he did a few martial arts moves to warm himself up. Meanwhile, Ed was following the sound of water and arrived at a stream that seemed to flow from the other side of the mountain, so he felt safe enough to drink from it. Somehow, his tooth mysteriously disappeared and never came back. He spotted a few goat tracks on the ground, and based on his experience, he figured that following the tracks downhill would eventually lead him to the foot of the mountain. Finally, our ninja managed to make fire successfully. He used a bamboo tube to heat the water before drinking it, then continued on his journey. Ed had reached the vast swamp, and the water ahead was getting deeper and deeper. This was a clear disadvantage for someone like him. He couldn't keep moving forward this way, so he had to turn back and look for another solution. First, he headed into the forest to look for shelter. He found a flat piece of land, perfect for setting up a simple camp, not only to shield himself from the wind, but also to protect against the rain. After that, Ed began searching for materials to start a fire. In just a few moments, he managed to light it up. For dinner, he roasted some frogs over the coals to regain as much strength as possible. Hakeem finally arrived at the swamp, but he couldn't find anywhere to sleep. So, he decided to rest outdoors, and spend the night under the open sky. The third day arrived, and despite heavy rain the night before, Ed's shelter was perfect. He stayed completely dry. He gathered materials to build a raft, preparing to cross the swamp. He also found some protein from insects and popped the rich, fatty bugs directly into his mouth. Our ninja is out searching for food when a mouse in the distance blocks his path. He quickly crafts a shuriken from 2 small branches. With ninja-like precision, he throws it toward the mouse. Bullseye? As expected from a true ninja, the shuriken lands perfectly, giving him a delicious roasted mouse meal. Ed is currently building a raft. He gathers branches, arranges them neatly, and ties them together. To finish it off, he adds a layer of grass on top. It looks solid until he climbs aboard. The moment he sits down, the whole raft sinks like a rock. Maybe Ed's not as light as he thought. Not giving up, he tried a different method. Ed rolled the grass into circular bundles, wrapped them with animal hide, and placed them back under the raft. And finally, it worked. The raft floated. Now that night had fallen, crossing the swamp would be too dangerous, so Hakim decided to wait until morning to continue his journey. He used a bit of tinder and successfully made a fire. At this point, the 2 men were on opposite ends of the swamp. Only 20 kilometers remained to reach the final destination. By the 4th day, Hakim also began his journey across the swamp. He crafted a special pair of shoes from his throwing stars to help him traverse the swampy terrain. Ed paddled through the night and finally reached the other side of the swamp. Luckily, there was no more swamp ahead. Not long after, Hakim caught up. Ed had chosen to go around to the right, while Hakim, by chance, picked the left path, a route that was 2 to 3 kilometers longer than Ed's. In the end, Ed was the first to reach the finish line and claim the victory. To cement his place in the world of survival, Ed Stafford has challenged all the top survival experts. His opponent this time is Egg Snyder, who once survived a grueling 21-day challenge without any clothing. Both will now attempt to survive in the Amazon for 5 days, without any equipment or food. As survival experts, the moment they met, they immediately exchanged strategies for the challenge ahead. This is the harsh environment of northern Thailand. Both contestants must start from a mountain peak and follow the river down to a dam 60 kilometers away. The first to reach the destination will be the winner. As for equipment, each contestant is given a knife to aid them in the challenge. As soon as the competition begins, both of them take off like wild horses, sprinting forward, only to find themselves sliding down a steep cliff. After running for a short while, Neater spots a banana tree. He quickly squeezes out a few drops of its essence and drinks it for hydration. Then, he gathers a bunch of banana tree cores to carry with him, an excellent natural source of carbohydrates. Without wasting any time, he takes off like a rocket again, and before long, he arrives at a flowing stream. On Ed's side, he spots the stream at the base of the mountain, but getting down is a real challenge. From his vantage point, the drop looks to be around 10 meters. At this moment, he has only 2 choices: slide down the steep slope or take the long way around. Thinking about his wife back home who still needs someone to take care of her, he decides to put victory on hold. At least for now. He chooses to take the long way around. The next day, determined to catch up, Ed sets off at dawn. If he doesn't come up with a special strategy soon, he might just end up finishing in 2nd place in this challenge. After running a long way around, Ed finally reaches the stream. Instead of drinking directly from it, he digs a hole beside the water. The soil can filter out most harmful impurities. Though the water still has a muddy smell, it is safe to drink. Now, if Ed wants to move faster, his only option is to cross the stream ahead. However, this is extremely dangerous. Not long after stepping into the water, he is swept away by the strong current. Luckily, a fallen tree stops him just in time, saving him from disaster. Neater had his own path. He chose to go through the forest, pushing through dense bushes. After walking a few kilometers, he stopped by a large tree, pulled out his knife, and struck the trunk multiple times, hoping to find something useful. However, all he got were small wood chips falling to the ground. He didn't seem satisfied with this outcome because, unlike Ed, going without food was something he couldn't handle. Skipping 9 meals over 3 days would make it impossible for him to continue the challenge. Luck was on his side. A snake appeared, ready to become his main meal for the day. At this moment, Ed was also thinking of a way to deal with the situation. Swimming across was definitely not an option. He had to build a raft to make it happen. He chopped down a few wild banana trees and tied them together to make a simple raft. Then, he set it afloat on the water, using his strength to gently maneuver it without exerting much energy. After reaching the shore, he moved along the trail, but he hadn't gone far before encountering a major obstacle. Not far from there, Nieder was starting a fire to prepare his grilled snake meal. He didn't know that Ed was standing behind him, watching everything. Ed chose to take a detour to overtake Nieder without him noticing. Luckily, Nieder had no idea what was happening. Ed couldn't stop laughing, thinking he had secured the lead. To save time, he didn't even set up a shelter for the night. This was where he would sleep tonight. That night, Nieder enjoyed a delicious grilled snake, while Ed went without food. Fasting was his strength. The third day of survival began, with only 2 days left to claim victory. Despite spending the night without a campfire or food, Ed was still full of energy. He ran tirelessly for hours. Meanwhile, Nieder accidentally fell into a cave. Unfortunately for 2 bats, they flew straight into his fire. Just like that, he got an unexpected source of protein falling from the sky. In his rush, Ed lost his footing and slipped, tumbling down a waterfall. Luckily, he wasn't injured upon landing. Now, he had no choice but to backtrack and find another way forward. Nieder seemed to be enjoying this survival challenge more than expected. Yesterday, he had grilled snake, and today, he was feasting on roasted bat. It almost felt like he was on a camping trip rather than a harsh survival test. Ed hadn't eaten anything for 3 days, and now he needed to replenish his energy. He climbed up a tree and stole a large ant nest. Without any preparation, he ate them right away while scratching himself from the ant bites. As night fell, with his stomach struggling from digestion issues, Ed vomited everything he had eaten earlier. His body felt weak from not having a proper meal for 3 days. Determined to find food, he decided to set up a small trap for rodents, hoping that by morning, he would have caught something to eat. Waking up the next morning, Ed went to check his trap, and to his relief, a large rat had been caught. After quickly preparing it by removing the head and skin, he roasted it directly over the fire. At last, he could enjoy his first real meal in days. Ed and Nieder didn't have much time left, so at this point, any wrong decision could lead to defeat. On the morning of the 5th day, this would be the deciding day to determine the winner. On one side, Nieder gathered wooden logs and built a raft, using the power of the water to speed up his journey to the finish line. The closer they got to the finish line, the faster our 2 survival experts pushed forward. There was no time for rest or food, only the drive to run as fast as they possibly could. Ed was the first to reach the finish line, but due to extreme exhaustion, he collapsed while trying to climb onto the bridge. But right behind him, Nieder was advancing fiercely. Instantly, Ed seemed to gain a surge of energy, climbing onto the bridge with all his strength and securing the victory. Ed's next opponent is Andikan, a renowned explorer. He possesses a strong and powerful physique, along with impressive survival skills. The location for this challenge is a vast mangrove forest, where competitors must navigate through crocodile-infested rivers. The first to reach the watchtower at the mountain's peak will be the winner. As soon as both competitors plunged into the water, the challenge officially began. They sprinted into the dense mangrove forest at full speed, climbing and leaping over the tangled branches with incredible agility. At first, thanks to his physical strength, Andikan seemed to have a slight advantage. Even though he was unfortunately kicked into the water, this didn't shake his determination. By nightfall, he had managed to set up a temporary sleeping spot on a sturdy tree trunk. As for Ed, he also secured himself a safe spot to spend the night. Waking up at 7 a.m., Ed began searching for his first meal in the mangrove forest. He found a large snail in the mud. With this type of snail, you can simply crack it open and eat it raw. However, we don't recommend trying this at home. It's extremely difficult to eat. On Andikan's side, thanks to his superior strength, he easily navigated through the dense branches of the forest. However, he believed that the most important thing now was to build a raft. It would help him cross the mangrove forest more efficiently. On Ed's side, He hurried toward the mainland, knowing that in a few hours, the tide would rise. He thought he had finally escaped the mangrove forest, but to his surprise, he had only reached another small island. Quickly, he gathered a large number of vines from nearby and wrapped them around tree trunks to form a triangular structure. This setup had to be sturdy. If not, he would have nowhere to sleep when the tide rose. His opponent was still struggling with his plan when, unfortunately, he fell into the water once again. As night approached, Ed prepared to start a fire. In the wild, fire helps prevent mosquito bites and wards off dangerous animals. Tonight, Ed can finally get a good night's sleep. By the third day, although Ando had considerable strength, his ability to endure hunger was not the same. He prepared a crab trap to regain his energy. The trap was nearly complete. He took it to the riverbank, adding a few leaves as bait. In no time, a crab was caught. He brought it ashore and ate it raw without any preparation. But remember, it's not recommended to try this yourself. On this side, our guy was trying to cross to the other bank. Even though he fell halfway through, no worries. He finally made it to the other side. Although Ed choked a bit on the water, he was fine and kept pushing forward towards the goal. Along the way, he unfortunately had a leech attach itself to his leg, sucking his blood. Not wasting time on it, he decided to make use of the leech as bait and quickly fashioned a simple fishing rod, hoping to catch a meal for the day. After a few minutes, a small catfish bit the hook. Ed was thrilled to see the protein source. That night, he enjoyed a delicious dinner and had a restful sleep, recharging for the challenges ahead. On day 4, the race was on. Both Ed and Andakan knew this was their last chance to make significant progress before the final day. Every move, every decision, and every step counted. They pushed themselves to the limit, knowing that the final stretch would be the ultimate test of endurance and skill. Ando, using his resourcefulness, quickly crafted a hook by tying a piece of rope around a tree branch. With all his strength, he threw the hook across to the other side. When the hook caught onto a sturdy branch, he flipped himself over and began to slowly and carefully make his way across. Ed was no less capable. He had built a hut out of palm leaves, planning to spend the night there. The final day had arrived. Both of them replenished some energy to prepare for today's sprint. With 10 kilometers left to the finish line, they were determined to win. The two of them started running like crazy. Ed charged straight toward the finish line, and the observation tower was right ahead. He climbed up and proved himself to be number 1, always ready for the next challengers. This time, Ed will push himself through some of the harshest environments on Earth, challenging top survival masters from around the world. At nearly 50 years old, can he still maintain the unbeatable form of a legendary survivalist? Let's follow along and find out. The location of this challenge is the Amazon rainforest. Ed once spent nearly 3 years here, walking close to 7,000 kilometers through its wild terrain, carving out his legend as a survivalist. So for him, returning to the Amazon feels just like coming home. No one knows this land better than he does, and he's arrived with a completely relaxed and confident mindset. His opponent this time is Tony, a man who served in the Special Forces for 13 years. His wilderness survival skills are truly formidable, so when Tony saw Ed, he wasn't afraid at all. After greeting each other, the two began their journey toward the central region of the rainforest. First, they passed through the high mountain forests and made their way to the lower reaches of the Black River. The Amazon is one of the largest and most ancient rainforests in the world, home to countless ferocious predators. One careless move, and you might just vanish without a trace. Both competitors were allowed to bring only a single knife as their tool. No other survival gear was provided. As required by the referee, this unprecedented showdown officially began. As soon as both of them hit the water, they began frantically swimming toward the mainland, which was 3 kilometers away. Ed's swimming skills weren't exactly his strong suit, while Tony seemed much more at ease. His swimming speed was impressive. Luckily for Ed, he spotted a clump of floating grass drifting along the river. He quickly swam over and used it as a temporary resting spot to catch his breath. On the other side, it didn't take long for Tony to reach the shore. Despite swimming a 3-kilometer stretch, he didn't seem the least bit tired. Without wasting any time, he immediately started searching for food before Ed could even make it to land. Without a second thought, Tony headed straight into the jungle. More than 2 hours had passed, and Ed was still lying under the sun on the river, his strength not yet fully recovered. It would be too risky to swim in his condition. Suddenly, a piece of driftwood floated by. It was like a lifeline thrown his way. Clinging to the wooden log, Ed managed to slowly make his way to the shore. This journey had already cost Ed 4 hours, and with nightfall approaching, he had to quickly build a shelter. In front of him, he spotted a small pond. The surface was densely covered with water lilies, and these could be just the thing to help fill his stomach. He quickly picked some to eat, then spotted another insect hiding in the lotus leaves, a bonus protein source to help boost his energy. On Tony's side, he had been running non-stop through the rainforest when he suddenly came to a halt. It looked like a snake was blocking his path. As he cautiously approached to check, it turned out to be just a dry leaf. The false alarm made him more alert. After all, this was his first time in the jungle, and he knew he couldn't let his guard down. He gathered a large number of tree barks, tied them around his legs, and used them as makeshift armor. This gave him a sense of safety, even though the rainforest was full of hidden dangers. He continued deeper into the jungle without taking a single break, knowing that his opponent was Ed, a true survival expert. Tony wanted to use this opportunity to widen the gap between them. Suddenly, he spotted a wild chestnut on the path, about the size of a watermelon. This wasn't too surprising, considering this was the Amazon, the largest tropical rainforest in the world. Wild chestnuts are rich in starch and vegetable oils, providing a great source of energy for the body. Tony couldn't believe how smoothly things were going. But with the sun beginning to set, he knew he had to quickly find a place to sleep, unless he wanted to become a midnight buffet for jungle mosquitoes. Meanwhile, Ed was busy chopping down trees to build his shelter. The first step was to set up 2 solid support poles. Then, he tied palm leaves onto the wooden stakes. Just like that, a wild outdoor tent was ready. Without wasting time, Ed moved on to building a fire. In less than 5 minutes, a thin trail of smoke began to rise, followed by a small campfire coming to life. Next, Ed began crafting a bed using palm leaves, getting everything ready for a good night's sleep. Tony was also planning to build a shelter, but with so many insects swarming around him, he decided it needed to be suspended above the ground. He then gathered palm leaves and arranged them around his sleeping area. This would help protect him from both rain and bugs. By the next morning, Tony woke up, packed up his shelter from the night before, and continued moving forward. He kept running madly deeper into the jungle, determined to reach the Black River before Ed. The tropical rainforest was swarming with mosquitoes and ants, and Tony was bitten non-stop throughout his journey. He paused for a moment to think, then realized that the acid in a mosquito nest could repel mosquitoes. Using a wooden stick, he poked the nest and smeared its contents all over his body. This time, it actually seemed to offer real protection against mosquito bites. While walking, Tony suddenly spotted a large rat hole on the ground. Not willing to pass up the protein right in front of him, he began crafting a hunting tool. First, he made a bow from a sturdy stick, then twisted strips of tree bark into a string. He sharpened a few thin bamboo sticks to use as arrows. A quality bow and arrow set was now complete. Ed, on the other hand, took a simpler approach. He just kept moving forward, aiming to reach the Black River area first and figure things out later. Thanks to his strong ability to endure hunger, he only needed water to keep going. He chose to walk along the river for better safety compared to traveling through the forest, although this meant his pace would be slower. To speed things up, he went ashore and chopped down a few hollow tree trunks, using them as makeshift flotation devices to help conserve energy. He thought this would be a safe solution, but to his horror, he suddenly realized there was an anaconda right beneath his feet. This creature could easily kill a crocodile. It's the true king of the river. Ed had no intention of facing it head-on, so he quickly retreated to the shore and continued his journey through the forest instead. But this didn't bother Ed at all. These water vines could easily replenish his hydration. Even though he accidentally slipped while climbing, he didn't mind. He simply chopped the vine and drank straight from it. The taste was like chilled aloe vera juice, refreshing and invigorating. Seeing that it was getting dark again, Ed planned to build a temporary shelter using the bark from the water vines. He used them to craft a hammock. Just as he was about to lie down for a quick rest, the hammock collapsed beneath him. He froze for a few seconds, then let out a sheepish laugh. There wasn't much else he could do. By the time he finished his work, night had already fallen. Ed sat down by the fire, warming up and drying his feet. After being trapped in his boots all day, they definitely needed it. Tony had no intention of building a shelter. He was still sprinting toward the finish line. His sole goal was to defeat Ed. But after traveling for so long without any sign of the Black River, doubt started to creep in. Maybe I've gone the wrong way, he thought. To reorient himself, he realized the only way was to trace back the path he had taken. His heart sank slightly. Clearly, he had strayed off course once again. Suddenly, the surface of the water rippled slightly. Based on his experience, he knew something big was lurking nearby. He slowly approached the puddle, and it turned out to be a giant electric eel. This was a huge source of protein. That night, he enjoyed a delicious meal of grilled electric eel, smoky and rich with flavor. The challenge continued into the third day. Ed had gotten about 3 kilometers ahead of Tony and reached the bank of the Black River first. But after 2 full days without a proper meal, his body was reaching its limit. He spotted a mysterious fruit hanging from a tree, its origin unknown. Ed had no idea if it was poisonous or not, but at this point, he could only take the risk. The fruit tasted sweet and sour, much like a loquat. It seemed harmless, at least for now. While gathering his spoils, Ed came across a carob tree. In the Amazon rainforest, these carobs are much larger than the ones you'd find in a supermarket. He split one open and tasted it. The flavor was bitter, with a hint of sweetness, strange but not unpleasant. A little while later, Ed found a few palm fruits on the ground. Though they were already dried up, he pried open the hard shells. What he was really after was the fat, juicy insect hiding inside. The rich, nutty flavor was unmistakable. That familiar aroma brought back memories, just like the first day he set foot in this wild jungle. Combined with the wild fruits he had gathered in the morning, his jungle-style rice ball packed with insect protein was finally ready. Meanwhile, Tony had been walking through the jungle for an entire day and night without catching a glimpse of the Black River. If things kept going like this, night would fall again before he got there. But after more than 3 exhausting hours, he finally found a water source. This was it, the long-awaited Black River. Upon reaching the Black River, he decided to build a raft to cross it. First, he gathered a large number of logs from the surrounding area. Then, he used palm fibers to tie them tightly together. After a while, a sturdy raft was finally completed. This was a great opportunity for him to catch up with Ed. Ed, on the other hand, wasn't having such a smooth time. He got stuck in a swamp, and every step became slower and more difficult. The water level kept rising as he moved forward. Not wanting to lose, he decided to build a raft. He cut down several palm trees to construct it, but the trees had been soaked in water for too long and had completely lost their buoyancy. Things suddenly took a turn for the better. He found a few dead trees floating on the surface of the water. Seizing the opportunity, he quickly built a small raft using these logs. And so, he continued his journey towards the finish line. The sky was showing signs of rain, and at this moment, he urgently needed to build a shelter. He began constructing a makeshift place to spend the night. Despite the increasing intensity of the rain, the water level was rising steadily, and he knew he could be swept away at any moment. He placed a layer of sticks on a frame to make a bed, and gathered a lot of palm leaves to create a roof. It seemed much better now, but the situation was still precarious. On this side, Tony continued to paddle forward tirelessly. Despite being drenched in rain and feeling his body growing weary, he had no intention of stopping. To complete his journey upstream, he had to keep moving. He paddled his boat until nightfall, then pulled ashore to rest. All he needed was to lie on the ground and fall into a deep sleep. The challenge had entered its 4th day. Ed woke up and got out of bed. He had slept quite comfortably the night before. What's more, he had managed to craft a paddle. Now his paddling speed had doubled. On this side, although Tony was ahead of Ed, he found himself in a state of crisis. His body was utterly exhausted, and unlike Ed, he didn't have a paddle. He could only use his hands to row, but the speed was painfully slow. Suddenly, Ed appeared right behind him in a completely unexpected way. Thanks to his paddle, Ed was moving swiftly along the river. With his strong, muscular arms, he rode like a true professional boat racer. Tony saw Ed getting closer and knew that there was no way he could beat him on the water. Without hesitation, he quickly ran ashore. Taking a shortcut through the forest was his only chance now. In order to beat Ed, he didn't hesitate to wade into the water, even though his swimming skills were still limited. Ed also ran into the jungle to compete with Tony, but he chose a safer route. Instead of swimming across the dangerous river, he decided to take the path through the forest. The finish line was just ahead. Ed picked up speed, swimming toward the boat where the referee was waiting. But then something unexpected happened. The referee announced that the winner was Tony. Ed was stunned. A wave of disappointment washed over him, and he couldn't hide the sadness in his expression. But it was okay. After all, this was just a survival challenge. He smiled, congratulated Tony on his victory, and was happy to walk away with a new friend by his side. This time, Ed's opponent is Lee, an officer of the South Korean Navy Special Forces. He wants to show everyone the true strength of the South Korean Navy. The challenge this time takes place in central Kazakhstan, a region known for having the largest population of wolves in the world. It's a massive labyrinth filled with ditches and dead ends everywhere. Many explorers have been forced to give up halfway when attempting to cross this treacherous land. Both contestants will start from the same point, make their way through the maze ahead, and then walk 90 kilometers west along the river. Whoever reaches the mountaintop first will be the winner. At the referee's signal, both contestants dashed out at the same time. The competition had officially begun. Both of them dashed wildly into the maze without a second thought. Lee, not paying attention, immediately ran into a dead end. To make matters worse, he accidentally got hit on the head by a falling rock, and it looked really painful. Ed used the sun to confirm his position, feeling confident and ready to head south. But unexpectedly, a 50-meter high cliff stood in his way. He was now stuck too. Feeling helpless and frustrated, Ed had no choice but to climb a nearby mountain to get a better view and figure out the right direction. At first glance, everything except for one narrow alley turned out to be a dead end. The terrain here was incredibly treacherous, and his map had completely stopped working. But Ed had no other choice. He had to keep moving forward. Ed had a tough first night. He slept leaning against a rock wall the entire night. Whether he liked it or not, he had to head back out and continue the challenge. At the moment, both of them are still inside the maze, and their progress is nearly identical. Ed found a skeleton on the road and used it as a foothold. Although it had long since dried out, its sturdiness was beyond question. Before long, he had climbed to the top of the mountain. From a distance, Ed spotted Lee's position, and Lee saw him too. They both locked eyes, and instantly, the pace picked up as they began to run faster toward the summit. Both of them reached the edge of the cliff. Just as Ed was hesitating, Lee boldly slid down without a second thought. Ed stood there stunned for a moment, shocked by Lee's daring move. Warning: do not try what Lee just did. It's extremely dangerous and should never be attempted. After climbing down, Ed found a small pool of water. He took a big gulp to rehydrate himself, then looked around for a shaded spot to rest, trying to escape the scorching 40°C heat. Lee reached a cave and hoped that by going through it, he could escape the maze faster and secure the victory. After crawling inside for a while, he was surprised to find that the exit was wide open. After nightfall, Ed also began to run with renewed strength. Not long after, he managed to escape the maze. Since he had rested well during the day, he was now ready to continue his journey through the night. By the third day, Ed had stayed up all night pushing forward and managed to catch up in progress. He decided to rest at his current spot and look for some food. Meanwhile, Lee took a shortcut to reach the riverside quickly, immediately showcasing his impressive swimming skills. Ed noticed wild rabbits all around him, so he set traps in the area where they were most active. He blocked both sides with tree branches so that any rabbit passing through would surely get caught. Then, he ran into the tall reeds, trying to drive all the rabbits toward his trap. After a while, one wild rabbit was successfully caught. Ed happily roasted it over a fire and enjoyed his well-earned meal. In the evening, while searching for food, Lee stumbled upon some dried fish on the shore. Since it was inedible, he decided to use it as bait. He attached it to a fishing line and set his rod along the bank. In the middle of the night, he suddenly heard the line twitching. A large catfish had hooked itself. Quickly, Lee hauled it in and took it back to his camp. He roasted the fish and enjoyed a delicious meal. By the fourth day, Lee had crafted a simple raft for crossing the river. It looked a bit basic, but it was functional. On the other side, Ed had also reached the riverbank. He made a circle using reeds and then tightly tied camel skin around it. A simple raft was ready. Since he couldn't use the raft at night, Ed planned to set off in the morning. Time quickly passed, and the final day arrived. Both competitors were entering the home stretch. The distance between them was now around 800 meters. However, given Lee's youth and strength, he quickly caught up with Ed. Realizing that his speed couldn't match Lee's, Ed abandoned the raft and climbed onto the shore. Lee, using all his strength, made it to the shore. In the distance, he could see the final sand dune. But despite Lee's effort, Ed was still the first to reach the finish line. His opponent in this challenge was Kat, a survival expert with 25 years of experience teaching primitive survival skills. When she was a child, her father had left her in the forest to survive on her own. She is the most promising female competitor capable of beating Ed. The location of this challenge is set on an archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. The environment here is home to many dangerous carnivorous creatures. The two contestants are placed on the northern and southern sides of the island. They must travel 120 kilometers through dense forest and open seas. The first to reach the old ship at the center will win the challenge. When both contestants jumped into the sea, the challenge officially began. They both tried to swim as fast as they could toward the shore. Before long, Kat reached the shore first. She planned to head north to gather as many resources as possible. Ed, however, still wanted to enjoy the sea and wasn't ready to get out of the water just yet. Fresh water must be the first priority when you're surrounded by the vast ocean. While searching for clean water, Kat suddenly caught a strong chemical smell. She guessed that it might be related to the area having gone through a war. Drums of oil, remnants from World War II, could be seen scattered everywhere nearby. Ed also made it to the shore and noticed a lot of trash and plastic bottles scattered along the beach. He cut a plastic bottle in half and placed it on the ground to collect rainwater, so he could drink fresh water naturally. First, Ed needed to head towards the small island ahead. Luckily, the water level wasn't deep, and he could walk across, saving his energy instead of swimming. However, he didn't expect that in less than 10 minutes, a massive storm would hit, and the water quickly became deeper. With no other option, he continued moving forward, eventually reaching the shore just before nightfall. That evening, he could only find a spot nearby to rest and sleep for the night. On the other hand, Kat had a peaceful sleep while Ed was out searching for her. The next day, Ed was making his way towards the center of the island. The path was treacherous, with sharp volcanic rocks that posed a serious danger if he accidentally cut himself. Along the way, the thorny leaves also scraped at him painfully. Every step was a battle, and the cuts and scratches seemed endless. Despite the overwhelming pain and exhaustion, Ed pushed forward with all his remaining strength and, after what felt like an eternity, he finally managed to get through the hazardous area. Kat reached a mangrove forest, and at this time, there were crocodiles in the water. She had to cross quickly before the tide rose. Beneath the dense tree roots ahead was a perfect spot for crocodiles to ambush, but despite her fear, she had no choice. She could only step on the higher tree roots as much as possible. After a while, she reached the shore. She needed to get to the island ahead, but she was certain she wouldn't be able to swim there. She thought about crafting a raft made of wood to cross over. There were many dry branches around, perfect for use as the raft's frame. Ed was thinking about catching seafood, as it would be a waste not to eat them while on the island. He made a simple trap from a coconut, and now all he had to do was wait for his prey to come. The rain continued to pour, and a strong storm was approaching. Kat could only pray silently, hoping that the weather would clear up as soon as possible. Some were happy, others were sad. When Ed went to check his coconut trap, he found a massive coconut crab. Its powerful claws were so strong that they could easily crack open a coconut. Ed enjoyed a 5-star dinner with roasted coconut crab. On the third day, the weather seemed to improve, and Kat began improving her raft. She needed to gather scraps of fabric and tie them together to make a sail. On his side, Ed was searching for a fresh water source on the island. He found a large, rusted metal barrel that could be used to boil water. He crafted a makeshift water filtration system using plastic tubes and a metal basket. Then, he boiled seawater in the barrel, and the steam condensed through the pipes, creating fresh water. After 30 minutes, his homemade fresh water was ready. To protect his eyes, Ed ground some charcoal powder and applied it around his eyes to reduce the glare from the sun. Before making the raft, he sketched it out on the sand. Afterward, he collected bamboo and wood, then began assembling the raft. Everything was going smoothly, and the raft was coming together well. It looked quite sturdy and functional. On this side, Kat was preparing to set off. She had to quickly assemble a sail. While Kat was still on the island, Ed had already sailed a few kilometers on his raft, leaving Kat far behind in terms of distance. It took Kat the entire day, and by evening, she still hadn't finished the sail. Meanwhile, Ed was drifting in the sea, with no land in sight. He had no choice but to sleep on the raft. The production crew was terrified witnessing this, and in the middle of the night, he was woken up by the cold. With no other option, Ed decided to continue toward the island ahead to get to the shore and rest. By the fourth day, with only 10 kilometers left to the finish line, Ed immediately set off early in the morning. Meanwhile, Kat had finally completed her large raft. The time spent had not been in vain, as once the raft hit the water, it started to float smoothly, carried by the wind. A moment later, both of them arrived at the island where the shipwreck had occurred. Ed thought he would lose, feeling discouraged as he walked towards the referee. However, when he learned that he was the first to arrive, he was overjoyed to find out that he had won the challenge. This time, Ed faces his toughest opponent yet. His name is John Hasten. He's the head survival skills instructor for the military, with over 25 years of experience teaching survival techniques. A truly influential figure in every sense of the word. The challenge this time takes place in the Himalayas, at an altitude of up to 8,000 meters above sea level. Not only is the air extremely thin, but the cliffs are also dangerously slippery. On top of that, beware of the wild black bears lurking in the area. Both will have to trek through steep and damp hills, covering a distance of around 100 kilometers. Whoever reaches the final stone bridge first will be crowned the winner. At the referee's signal, both competitors set off. John decided to climb up a hill to get a better view of the terrain, allowing him to easily choose the best route. Meanwhile, Ed ignored all that. He simply followed the riverbank on foot, determined to reach the finish line his own way. After walking for just a short while, Ed slipped and tumbled straight into the water due to the slippery rocks beneath his feet. Meanwhile, John kept picking up speed as he moved forward. Along the way, he even gathered some vines in case he needed them later. Without hesitation, he quickly climbed up the mountain. Before long, he reached the mountainside, but now, thick fog had set in, making it impossible for him to see anything. Ed had also reached a higher position by this time. The visibility around him was extremely low due to the thick fog enveloping everything. But drawing on his many years of jungle experience, he knew that the side of trees with fewer leaves usually faces north. Using that knowledge, he was able to determine his direction and continued making his way toward the mountainside. Heavy rain began to pour as John was walking. He slipped and slid down the slope. Luckily, just ahead of him was a natural cave. He decided to stay there and use it as shelter for the night. Ed was in the same situation. He had also found a place to rest for the night. Suddenly, a loud noise woke him up. But stepping out of the cave at this time would be too dangerous, so he decided to wait until morning. Based on the scratch marks on the tree, it became clear that Ed had spent the night in a bear's den. The bear was probably nearby. It was definitely best to run away from this place as quickly as possible. As for John, he woke up after a good night's sleep and felt thirsty. He searched everywhere and finally found a small stream beneath a rock wall. Squeezing himself through a narrow gap, he discovered the decaying remains of an animal, giving off a foul stench. Fortunately, the water was still drinkable. He chose a spot far away from the carcass to quench his thirst, then found his way back out to continue the challenge. At this point, Ed had made it down into the valley. In the distance stood the stone wall, the final destination of the challenge. It was right there, in plain sight. He began to lay out a clear plan for the days ahead, determined to make sure that he would be the one to claim victory. As for John, he had found a place to spend the night. He quickly gathered some dry branches to build a fire, shielding himself from the cold night. It all seemed pretty easy for him. Ed was doing the same, using all his strength to start a fire. Thanks to his prior experience, he continuously rubbed a wooden stick against dry grass. After more than 30 minutes, the first flame finally sparked to life. That was already a big improvement compared to the night before. On the morning of the third day, the first thing Ed did was craft a simple backpack. He tied 3 branches together into a triangle shape, hoping it would come in handy for the challenges ahead. Time to hit the road. John didn't want to go hungry. He was hoping for some meat. He took apart a microphone, which was covered in a waterproof rubber casing. The material had good elasticity, and now he was going to use it to make a slingshot. With skillful hands, he crafted it bit by bit. Not long after, the slingshot was ready. Immediately, he began searching for his first prey. Slowly and quietly, he crept up on a bird without alerting it. He took careful aim and delivered a precise, deadly shot, bringing down his target with one clean hit. As for Ed, he heard some movement next to a rock. When he lifted the rock, he discovered a small snake underneath. He used a flat stone to finish it off, then ate it on the spot, raw and unprocessed. After finishing his meal, he continued on his journey once again. On his side, John discovered a goat's skull along the path. He used some fat he had collected earlier to create a lamp. Breaking off a piece of the skull, he carefully inserted the fat inside. This clever trick allowed him to carry a source of fire with him. After a long hike, Ed had made it halfway up the mountain. But as darkness began to fall and the peak was still nowhere in sight, he found himself stuck on the slope. It was a dangerous situation. One wrong move could cost him dearly. He had no choice but to lean his back against the rock face and try to sleep through the night right there. By the 4th day, both men were climbing up the rocky cliff. Massive boulders and thick fog were slowing John down, making it nearly impossible to pick up speed. Even though he was a survival instructor, the challenge was slowly wearing down his stamina. Ed finally reached the mountain peak. He quickly drank from a nearby waterfall to rehydrate. Up next, both of them would begin their descent, and going downhill was definitely going to be easier. Ed chose to follow the stream, and both men began picking up speed as they neared the stone bridge, the final destination. In the end, Ed was the first to cross it and claim victory. Ed's opponent in this challenge is a heavyweight fighter named Matt. He's also a marathon runner. Running hundreds of kilometers a day is just another Tuesday for him. This time, the challenge takes place in the vast Gobi Desert of Mongolia. Both men will start from the bottom of a valley, then trek 100 kilometers north. Whoever reaches the salt flats first will be the winner. Just a few minutes into the run, the weather shifted dramatically. A cold front was sweeping in, and at an altitude of 3,000 meters, getting wet and exposed to strong winds could be life-threatening. Light rain began to fall, and Ed quickly made the risky decision to descend into the valley. The slopes were slick and dangerous, but he wanted to move faster than Matt. He had heard people call Matt the son of nature, but this time, Ed was determined to show him what it truly meant to be the king of survival, without food or water. Lost in thought, Ed accidentally slipped down the slope, but luckily, he stopped just in time before tumbling over a steep cliff. Meanwhile, Matt was still charging ahead like a madman. It didn't take long before he reached a small stream. After quickly hydrating himself, he gathered a few branches from the surrounding area, ready to build a shelter for the night. An eagle was soaring high in the sky. Ed figured there had to be prey nearby on the cliffside. With all his strength, he climbed up and discovered countless caves of various sizes scattered around. Wasting no time, he set up a simple trap and began to wait patiently. To avoid the rain at night, Matt began building a shelter using wooden logs, then covered it with branches all around. True to his nickname, Son of Mother Nature, he easily started a fire within minutes. Now, all he had to do was craft a tool to catch prey. He decided to make a spear, relying on his own strength and skill. Everything was ready. He just had to wait for tomorrow to begin the hunt. Ed also found a natural cave on the cliffside to spend the night. The next day, Ed's trap from the previous night yielded no results. He had to find something else to eat. As he continued on his path, he stumbled upon the carcass of an animal. After sniffing it, he realized it had been there for quite some time. Although the horns were inedible, He figured they could serve as a container for water. Ed then discovered a new hole and set up another trap, hoping it would bring him some food. Matt woke up early in the morning and started running. Like a moth to a flame, he focused solely on moving forward, climbing over one cliff after another without showing any signs of fatigue. At the summit, he saw the finish line right before his eyes. Mark decided to keep sprinting toward the finish line. It was time for Ed to check the effectiveness of his new trap. If there was no food, he would have to continue his journey with an empty stomach. Fortunately, a prey had been caught in the trap. Ed was ready to make the most out of this mole. He used the mole's skin to create a water container, made a stand, and cut the meat into strips to smoke it. Matt was charging toward the finish line, and the distance between him and Ed had widened by tens of kilometers. He had a significant advantage in terms of distance. The sky was growing darker, and now he only needed to rest for the night. However, the spear in his hand still hadn't been used. He noticed a few small mice ahead and wanted to catch them for food, but after several attempts, he caught nothing. Realizing that if he didn't find food soon, he needed to make fire to ward off the cold of the night. That night, despite the lack of food, he was still in high spirits, knowing he was so close to the finish line. By the third day, Ed was replenishing his energy for the morning. After finishing his meal, he carefully wrapped up all the meat he had gathered the previous day, preparing to carry it with him and eat along the way. On Matt's side, he was still pushing himself to run under the scorching heat of the sun, even though he was already far ahead of Ed. From where he stood, Matt spotted a river in the distance. He made his way towards it, eager to replenish his water supply. Carrying too much meat was draining Ed's energy, so he quickly came up with a clever solution. He designed a small cart using dry branches and placed the meat inside. With everything secured, he began pulling the cart along, making it easier to continue his journey without wasting too much energy. On Matt's side, he reached the stream and took a big gulp of water, refreshing himself. Before nightfall, he crafted a wooden water container from dry wood, knowing he wouldn't make it to the finish line without it. With the container ready, he could continue his journey without worrying about dehydration. Ed also found a spot to rest for the night. By the fourth day, the sun was even hotter than the day before. Ed had to pace himself, walking carefully while constantly sipping water from the leather pouch he had made. Matt hadn't eaten for a long time, so he decided to try catching mice once again. After many failed attempts, he finally succeeded in catching one. He quickly skinned it and roasted it over the fire, enjoying the delicious taste of the smoky grilled mouse. After eating, he continued his journey. Ed was almost exhausted, walking through the hot, dry desert with his water pouch completely empty. He continued forward for a few kilometers and noticed the sand ahead appeared darker and had a more humid look. Seeing a glimmer of hope, he began digging. Luckily, he found water. He used his hat as a cup to drink, filling his water pouch before continuing on his journey. Suddenly, a sandstorm blew in unexpectedly. Ed had no choice but to wait for the wind and sand to subside before he could continue his journey. On the other side, Matt ran to a large lake. He decided to stay here overnight to rehydrate and prepare for the final sprint tomorrow. A little while later, Ed also arrived at the large lake. To avoid being spotted, he crouched down and quickly turned away to run. He decided to work while his opponent was resting. On the fifth day, only 10 kilometers remained until the finish line. Now, both Ed and Matt were progressing at the same pace. When Ed reached the finish line and looked around, he couldn't spot Matt anywhere. He joyfully realized that he was the winner.